Thank you for tuning in for Let's Talk About It with Xavier Fox. I am Xavier Fox. On Monday mornings, Thursday and Friday afternoons, we're on a journey. Be ready to laugh and open to learn. We're going to learn other viewpoints on relationships, information on health and fitness, investing, sex, and much more. Today, we kick off with Marvin Harris and his segment, Love, Sex, and the Ships They Sail In On, as he delves into when your partner has issues. And then Nicole Williams will be in the house for the What's Hot segment. And we're talking celebrity gossip, movies to Netflix and chill with, books to cuddle up with, and all the hot events, lounges, and restaurants in the DMV area. If you want to participate on the show today, feel free to zoom in using the link that you can find on my Facebook page, Xavier Fox, or join the public Facebook group, Let's Talk About It with Xavier Fox, where you can get all the info and interact with the personalities on the show. If you go to xavierfox.com/radio-show, you can find the schedule for the month of January to see when your favorite personality or topic is scheduled. So let's get into it. How you doing today, Marvin?
Hi, Xavier. How are you?
I am great. How about yourself?
Doing all right. Doing
That
just fine. I always enjoy hearing you state the name of this segment. You always have a little laugh at the end of
yes, the ships they sail in on love, sex, and the ships, because we know those are generally situationships.
it. That's right.
Yeah, in today's
Absolutely.
society, we got a lot of situationships going on because
Yeah, we got a lot of ships.
a lot of folks have partners that have issues.
Yeah, this was a topic I believe that came up in the middle of our discussion, maybe last time we talked. And I thought I would expand on it for the hearers and share a little bit in terms of how to manage situations like this, because I do believe there is dysfunction in families, in relationships, and in individuals. And some of the dysfunction that occurs in an individual shows up in the form of what we describe issues.
Yeah. And those individual issues, they affect the relationships and the family. So it all
Exactly.
starts. Yep, that's where it all starts.
It all comes full circle. So for one to actually be able to identify that there are some individual concerns and then to properly address them, they will be able to positively impact their own lives and the lives of others. So I believe that this topic was one that had to happen at some point or another. I'm glad we're at this point now.
I agree. And since it actually is a very serious topic, before we actually get deep into the topic, tell everybody who you are and what you do again, so they know the credibility that we're working with here.
Sure. My name is Marvin Harris, and I am a licensed clinical professional counselor. Master's degree from the Illinois School of Professional Psychology, and I have been in practice in some form or another for at least the past 30 years. I started off working in schools. From there, I moved on to working in nursing homes in social work capacity. From there, I worked in psychiatric hospitals. So I've seen some of the more severe cases as well. From there, I worked at a bevy of social service agencies where I've worked as a psychotherapist, I've done family counseling, I've done individual counseling, I've done couples counseling, I've done group counseling. I have dealt with diagnoses as extreme as schizophrenia or as basic as depression. So there's a great deal of time that I spent in this work because I've wanted to, and I've enjoyed it, and I still enjoy it. And one of the parts I really enjoy about this work is just being in a position where I can watch people just evolve, open up, blossom, and be committed to their own growth. And as a result, it has given me a great deal of satisfaction. And I'm told many of the clients I've had, they've been satisfied as well.
Okay, so as you talk about issues, your partner having issues, or even maybe the person listening is actually the partner that has the issues. So as we talk about this, as we delve into this topic, you're definitely qualified to speak on this. And it's not something brand new. It's not just an opinion. It's something that you studied and experienced and know to be true.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I have provided this kind of work to our community again for almost 30 years now, and I have dealt with some of the most dysfunctional situations uh, that involve, husband, wives, children. I have dealt with individuals who have really struggled with their own emotional and mental health as a result of things that occurred in their background due to trauma. Different abuses that have taken place. So this is something that I have studied and dealt with for many, many years. But it is a valid topic, very valid topic.
All right, well, I'm gonna let you go ahead and do your thing because you usually have some bullet points for us. So
I do. I do. I always, try to break it down a little bit so people can have something they can put in writing and go back to. So I'm gonna start off by saying that, with the pandemic, Xavier, we are appearing to be moving in a direction of acceptance when it comes to mental health and emotional issues. We are moving in a direction of destigmatizing this, but I also think we should be aware that along the way we are also trivializing it as well.
mm,
Um, I'm sure that you've heard people jokingly refer to someone as bipolar
absolutely.
or or crazy or that's just the way they are. Those kind of statements, they're very derogatory. And it's the kind of language I find uh, in the context of relationships sometimes. People just kind of like jokingly refer to their partner as crazy or bipolar or you got issues, and without really being able to identify what's really going on and finding a safe path for the both of you to address it. Because if you're in a relationship with someone and they appear to have some mental health or emotional issues, you're in a relationship, so this impacts you as well. So you need an environment as well to be able to discuss what's going on.
True.
Um, so I think the first thing we got to do is really continue on the path of destigmatizing mental health and really start diving into how we can seriously take a look at the concerns that individuals have at this point.
So let me ask
Um,
you this,
mhm,
because I know that in the African American community, this is
mhm.
a big one. So to deal with mental health issues, can you pray it away or leave it on the altar?
This is a really important question here, and even though it's kind of tongue in cheek, it's an important question because, as you know, Xavier, the African American community for years we have had very close ties to church and religion, and we have been told historically, generation wise, that we go to God in prayer, go to Jesus to save us and to heal us, and there's nothing that's too big for God for us.
Mm,
I want to add to that because, yes, if you are one that believes in God and believes in, your said religion, I believe your religion also, when looked at in depth, will also indicate that there are people that God has given different vocations to and given different, responsibilities to in order to assist us in our daily living. Um, there's never an argument from anyone, for the most part, when it comes to physical issues that you have. If you right now fell and broke your leg, most of us, the first thing we're going to do is try to seek some medical assistance.
mhm.
That's the first thing we're going to do because that pain is going to hit you and you're going to be like, you need some help. This needs to be fixed right away. So I just don't. see most people getting on their knees and asking God to heal them at that point only.
Right.
So with that said, it is the same sort of mentality that we must have when it comes to our mental and emotional health issues. And I'd further state, and I believe I might have said this to you before, Xavier, that when one addresses their mental and emotional health, it has a trickle down effect and it has a way of positively impacting your physical health. It has a way of positively impacting your financial health. It has a way of positively impacting every area of your life if you properly address what's going on with you mentally and emotionally. So there are people that are out here um, that who are spiritually based, who believe in God, but also believe that there is dysfunction that lies in us that has to be addressed from a professional, right? And as a result, many people are benefiting from psychotherapy at this point. So if you are one that believes that, hey, God is going to heal me and whatever's on with me emotionally and mentally, he's got me, I say more power to you. But if you want to really understand what's going on with you and inside of you, along with your prayer, seek assistance from a psychotherapist.
Yes, absolutely. Because you know, I actually was a minister at one point, and one of the things that Bishop always said is and people need to really take to heart is that God uses man here on earth. So he, as you said, he put people in places. Everything you need is right here.
Hmm.
Exactly. So you need to seek those people in those places, that
Hmm.
man or woman that, you know, God put in a place here to help you. So, okay, that's my last question. I'm gonna let you do your thing. I'm
No
waiting for your
problem.
bullet points.
No problem. No problem. You know, I'm always interested in your engagement in this program. So you feel free to ask questions whenever you like.
Okay.
Um, so when we talk about mental health, just like we've described, when it comes to our community, there is a stigma when it comes to mental health. We have to create environments where people can feel safe when they say that there is something going on inside of them. All right. These environments have to be very comforting, non-judgmental. You got to be, in a space where people can really feel like they can talk about, how they're feeling. Um, there are these different, ways that people approach emotional expression, and we can talk about this, of course, in terms of gender. Um, Sometimes men have difficulty expressing how they feel. There's another stigma that's out there that says that women overly express themselves. We can talk about it and all those angles and many more. But the truth is, everybody deserves a space to be able to freely share what their thoughts and what their feelings are. And when you're in a relationship and it appears that your partner might be challenged in some areas, the first thing you got to do is create an environment. So this is your first bullet point. You got to create an environment where one can feel safe to express themselves.
Okay.
That is the very first point. If that is not in place, everything else I'm about to tell you, it just won't happen.
Okay.
There has to be a space for communication. There has to be a space where people don't feel judged. And this is a very challenging area because for years we've been judging people and stigmatizing people because they have some mental or emotional health issues. But
True.
we, as partners, if you're in a relationship with someone, you got to create a safe space for it. So that's the first bullet point. Second bullet point, and this one is more so for the individual who's claiming that the partner has issues. You have to check yourself and make sure you are not projecting. So
That's a
I've
tough one.
yes, yes. I have been in several situations sitting down with couples where, there is one that's blaming the other partner for everything that's going on. And as I listen to them, I find that the one that's doing the blaming is the one that actually has the issues.
Hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we gotta be able to check yourself, do some self-reflection, make sure you do your homework when it comes to your own dysfunction, because we all got some dysfunction in us, right? And make sure that we are not projecting on our partner and blaming them for things that are taking place in your life.
That's actually a tough one
Yeah.
because everybody thinks they're right.
Yes.
And what I think is that's the point where before you tell someone else that they need to go to therapy, you both should go as a couple,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
because then you can actually identify, you have someone else, a third party who's unbiased and trained, that can actually identify where the issue is actually originating. Because if we in an argument and you tell me I have issues, but I think you are the one that has issues, we're going around in a circle.
Yes, absolutely. And I couldn't agree with you more, Xavier. If you are in a relationship and there seems to be some difficulty between the both of you, and you've kind of concluded that maybe your partner has some additional things going on, it is the best way to approach it is by going to couples therapy. And that way you can remove yourself from it. And the therapist, if the therapist is worth his weight in any way, will be able to identify where the problematic behavior is coming from. And that way, it's out of your hands, and you don't have to feel like you are at fault anymore. So, so yes, absolutely. Herein lies yet another reason why we should seek professionals rather than trying to handle things on our own. So, excellent point. Excellent. So, again, um, we have to check ourselves, all right, and make sure that we're not projecting our own issues on the other person, which is very challenging. It's very challenging because first you got to be able to do the work of identifying what your own issues are. And once you've identified your own issues, you have to do the work of being able to manage or address those successfully to the degree that you can actually be able to identify concerns in others. So when we were told in grad school that we had to go see a therapist to address our own issues,
Mm-hmm.
it was really important that we did that.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we didn't, you sit down with someone for 5 or 10 minutes that may be dealing with trauma in their life, their trauma becomes your trauma because they may say some things or do some things that remind you of some things that happened in your life. And before you know it, you're
You're
not
triggered.
providing therapy anymore and you're
Mm-hmm.
triggered.
Mm-hmm.
So it is essential that um, we seek assistance in these matters and also be able to address our own stuff before we
When I went
start
through
pointing out other people's stuff.
when I went through my certification to become a coach, we actually
Mhm.
did that same thing. We had to go through the process. And, it for one, she said we needed to know what the other people were going through and experiencing and feeling, on the other end. And going through some of those activities and the homework assignments that she gave us, it really, for me, it really opened up a lot. I always say that changed my life so much. I am grateful to be able to help others with the knowledge that I have, but I am even more grateful that somehow the universe aligned for me to be in that coaching myself.
Yes.
That was just amazing for me.
Mhm.
People don't even realize how much it really opens you up and frees you from a lot of things that you don't even realize you're still dealing with.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, we think we got a handle on things, and we think that the things that occurred in our life weren't all that bad. One of the main things I hear when it comes to adults that come in, I ask them about their childhood, and I ask them, did you, receive any corporal punishment, or were you spanked at all? And then they begin to describe to me how their parents hit them with hangers when they got out of the tub, or when they were sitting watching TV. Maybe like some very hard object was thrown at their face. All
Mm.
right. So, and then they say, well, my parents did the best they could. They began to kind of like talk it away. When in reality, there was some abuse that took place there. There was some trauma that took place, and you've never really addressed it.
Mm-hmm. And I like to add that maybe at that time, whatever their parents were going through and whatever their parents' old trauma was, maybe that was the best that that person could do at that time. However,
Absolutely.
that does not mean that it did not affect you.
Right.
It still affected you. Just because it was the best that they could do doesn't
Mhm.
mean that it was good for you.
Yes. Yes.
Exactly.
Yes. Exactly. So, you are sitting in the room with me when I'm doing therapy, because that's exactly where I take it. I
Mhm,
confirm for them that I'm sure your parents did the best they could, but how did it affect you? And
mhm,
that's when the room gets silent. And
mhm,
typically people either turn away or the tears begin to flow. Something happens at that point.
mhm.
And personally, Xavier, I'm not afraid to go there with people, because I know if they address those things, they make them better people.
Yep.
And it doesn't mean that their parents were the worst people in the world. It just doesn't.
Right.
So
It means that
yeah,
we're all human and we've all been through something, and we do the best we can where we are at that point. But just as they're sitting in front of you trying to become better so they can do better from that point forward. But I
mhm,
think during our parents' times, I know during my parents' time,
mhm,
going to a therapist or a psychologist or psychiatrist, that type of thing, that didn't happen until you had a nervous breakdown and you was sitting in the middle of the street naked or something.
exactly.
You
Which
didn't have
brings
a
me,
choice but to go.
mhm, mhm. Which brings me to my next point. Mental and emotional concerns don't mean you're crazy or unstable. It just simply doesn't. All
Right.
right. So what we've come to conclude is just what you described, that we only put mental health issues in one category, and that is of severe.
Hmm.
And in reality, if we actually, in moments when we felt really good, decided that we were going to go see a therapist and sit down and just talk, you're doing the preventive work then, all right, rather than waiting or unknowingly getting to a point where you are beginning to unravel and really can't hold things together.
Right.
So, um, but with that said, though, schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, extreme cases of bipolar disorder, these are more severe cases. And most people aren't walking around here with those sort of like issues going on, right? So we have to begin to, again, destigmatize the idea that mental health issues fall under the category of one talking to themselves all the time, or seeing things that are not there. No, it's a much broader spectrum when it comes to our health,
Hmm.
much broader spectrum. So this point is really important from the standpoint that if you're going to be able to have a dialogue with your partner regarding their mental or emotional needs, you have to be able to talk to them in a very broad manner, and not just from the standpoint that something is like terribly wrong with you. And again, we've talked about parents and growing up, and how there are things that occur sometimes when we grow up, during our formative years, that really, create pathology in us, ways that we do things that maybe just aren't, what we consider normal. Like, for example, um, here's one of these things in the African American community that's really like, uh, um, consistent too. Um, Parents tell us to sit down for dinner and we eat, but we don't finish our plate. So they tell us, you better finish your plate or I'm gonna what?
Whoop you.
Yep. All right. If that's said to a child over a period of time, it could very well create some pathology where you have this fear or this urgency to eat or to complete your plate or to eat more than you should. When in
Mm.
reality, you know how Black folks are when we would put together plates. A
Mhm.
lot of us put together these high plates, all
Yep.
right, filled with food. And I'm at a point in my life, I don't know about you, Xavier, when someone put together a plate like that for me, I'm gonna eat some of it, but I ain't eating all of
I'm not either. I'm gonna eat what I
it.
want, and that's it.
Exactly. And so I'm not eating all of it. But that is an example of how pathology starts in people. And there's many more examples that we could give when it comes to this, where our parents again were doing the best they could, because I know where that came from. The chances are there's a period of time when there was no food in the house or there was very little food, and they wanted you to show appreciation for the food that you had by eating it all. I get it. All right. But the threats that came along with it over a period of time, it can create some dysfunction in an individual and it can come out in other relationships.
Hmm. That's the beginning of that overeating. A lot
Hmm.
of people start overeating and the obesity and struggling with weight and things of that nature because they feel like they have to eat that food. My mom, I used well, my mom, I like my vegetables a little crunchy and I like them fresh. My mom was with them canned vegetables or their frozen stuff, and she would cook everything until it was super soft and mushy, and it was just
Yeah.
not good to me. And so
Hmm.
she would make me sit there until I
Yes.
ate it. So it's
Hmm.
like 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm sitting here with my head in a plate of broccoli.
Yes.
That's crazy.
Yes. 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 Since we're sharing, I remember times where I would sit at a table and we would sit down for dinner and the lights, light would be outside, but I didn't want to eat all my food. So I'm sitting there, I'm watching the sun go down, watching the sun go down. And it's, that occurred so many times. This is not the way that we should be parenting because of the after effects that it could have on you.
And
So,
it's so simple, what
mhm,
why don't you want to eat it? I used to make my kids try it. I said, you don't know if you like it or not until you try it. Once
that's
they
right.
try it, if they actually really just didn't like it, then I didn't make them eat that because everybody has different taste buds. Like I love broccoli now because I learned over time that I like it a little crispy and I like it fresh. I like go to the produce section, not the canned goods or the frozen stuff. I like it
Hmm.
fresh, a little bit of steam. I want to bite into it and hear the crunch, put
Hmm.
some seasoning on it, and it's delicious.
Yes.
The way that it was prepared wasn't good to me, but you have that trauma of someone forcing you to do something that is
Hmm.
almost disgusting to you. And then that thought in itself can become a behavioral issue because then you think it's normal for people to force you to do things that you don't really want to do.
Yes, that's where the complexities come in. You're absolutely right about that. We are so complex as individuals that when we are in situations of when we were growing up, it just has a way of just branching off into other behaviors and creating other behaviors and just creating other ways that we do things as we grow up until we are able to identify where it came from, and then create and be intentional in our efforts to change it.
Mhm.
Because what happens is that, again, if it happens during our formative years, it just becomes a default in us. It's just the way that we do things. It's our natural response to things. And if and when we decide to be intentional about it, we can change the behavior. We can change how we're impacted by it. But it's much easier just to kind of like continue to do what we naturally have been doing. But in order for behavior to change, we have to be intentional. So yes, things get really complicated over time, depending on what has occurred in your life. It can grow into something that's so complicated. It's like going into a drawer where all your chargers are and you're trying to find that right charger and everything's so tangled up. Mm,
Yeah.
mm. No, it is difficult. It is very difficult. So that was our third point. Making sure um, that we understand that our mental and emotional concerns don't mean that you're crazy or unstable, right?
Mhm.
Another point here to be made when it comes to being in a relationship with someone that may have what we call
Hmm.
issues is uh, knowing that it is not your job to fix them. It's
Right.
not your job. And this is where we talk about the individual work that we all must do before we get into a relationship and continue to do as we enter into relationships. This whole idea that, um, for years people were saying that, two whole people come together to create a relationship. Not too sure about that. All right. I think that prior to getting into a relationship, yeah, there's a lot of work that needs to be done. But once you get into the relationship, and this is what relationships do, they bring out all the stuff.
Hmm.
It's like looking in the mirror. They
My
bring out
mentor said that's
all
what
the
they're
stuff.
supposed to do. They're supposed to bring out
Exactly.
some stuff. Hmm.
Exactly. Exactly. So this whole idea that you got it all together and that's the reason why you in a relationship and there's something wrong with the other person, no, 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 no. It's relationships are challenging and they're supposed to bring out stuff that you thought was dormant or stuff that you weren't even aware of. And
Hmm.
at that point, you're supposed to start talking about it. And if you can't successfully talk about it with your partner, again, you got to find a third party to address it. Because for as long as you're all together, there will always be something that comes up in your relationship based upon your past growing up, your past relationships, your past interactions at work. It's always going to be something that comes up. So it is at this point that things have to be addressed. But
So I want to hop in again because this is on my mind. I'm getting older. My memory sometimes, if I don't say it, I forget it. So, all right. So let's say that your friend is in a so this was the situation. This is when I was in my 20s.
sure.
I had a friend and her guy was abusive.
Mhm.
Abusive to the point that one night I had to go and pick her up because not only had he hit her, beat her, or whatever, he had locked her outside of the house naked.
Mm,
So she was calling me from a payphone outside on the street naked. Okay. Which of course, my little other side of it, being the OCD person I am, I had an issue with that because I didn't want her sitting on my seats because she was naked,
mhm.
so I had to find something. But anyway, as
Mhm.
once I got her in the car, we were situated, I brought a blanket and stuff, or whatever, she was wrapped up. Um, I said, "Why do you stay with him?" And she said to me, if he hits me because he loves me. If he didn't do all of this, I wouldn't think he loved me. So what are some signs that people know their partner, short of beating them? If you're being beaten, your partner has an issue. That's just plain and simple. They have either some control issues, some temper, emotional issues. They have some issues, and you should be in therapy so that it can be addressed by a third party. But
Mhm.
short of them actually beating you? What are some signs that your partner does have an issue? And even if the person listening to the show, if you identify with this as well, you know that you could be the problem. What are some signs that a
Mhm.
person has an issue?
Yeah, that's an excellent question, as usual, Xavier. Um, I think that there are many symptoms or signs prior to people becoming physically or verbally abusive that people can see that will clue you in that there may be something going on. Um, you want to start off by identifying chronic behavior. And chronic behavior is anything that occurs pretty consistently, right? And chronic behaviors such as being emotionally distant, not being able to express themselves or express how they feel consistently, or overly expressing how they feel through one emotion, such as sadness or anger. That sort of emotional distance is a sure symptom that there's something going on. Also, one of the things that you want to identify as a sign is chronic or consistent irrational behavior, where you're trying to talk with them and they just simply don't get what you're saying at all. And you talk to them over and over again over a period of days, weeks, months, and not getting it. There's a block there that a therapist can probably help them identify and help them open up the door so they can actually be able to hear and see what other people are saying. So consistent irrational behavior is definitely a symptom. In addition, if a person is consistently tired all the time, or as we say, lazy, they never want to do anything, all right, then that should be called into question as well. What's going on? It appears that you always just want to just sit around and, you know, we never do anything together. You know, you're irritable. I ask you to do simple things and or ask you to talk about simple things and you fly off the handle with these sort of chronic and consistent behaviors. These are the ones that people need to be able to identify early on before it gets to the point, before it potentially gets to the point uh, of what you described when it came to your roommate or when you were in college, your friend. Okay,
Yep.
all right, all right. So moving on. The last one was that it is not our job to fix them. We have to keep that in the forefront. Forefront. The next one is that we have to accept that version of the individual. So we all have like these expectations of people and how we think people should communicate and how we think people should present themselves. But sometimes people present in a different way. All right. And there are certain things about people that are simply not going to change. Xavier, I think you know this, that when we get to a certain age, it's not about changing anymore. It's about growing. All right. And if we grow, people have a tendency to modify certain behaviors, but they're not changing them. They're simply not changing. So when you're in a relationship with someone that has issues, as we say, sometimes you have to be able to accept certain behaviors that they display as part of their um, ability or your ability to manage what's going on between them, between the both of you. So this does not mean that you're going to tolerate abusive behaviors. No, it doesn't mean that. But sometimes, you know, when people have issues, they may elevate their voice a lot more than you typically do.
Hmm.
So it's in those moments you got to be able to read beyond the elevation of the voice and be able to hear what they're trying to say, so that maybe you can get in there and focus on what the concern is and help them to kind of bring it down.
One
But
of the things that I heard a long, long time ago, I've used it in my relationships. If they're just going off, well, I'm a little emotionally detached for my own reasons from childhood, but
uh,
I now I know that, but back then, I still used it to my benefit after I heard this, because I can sit through somebody yelling and screaming and just remain calm. So one of the things that I heard was, when the person is done talking, you tell them, okay, what I heard you say was, you repeat
yes,
what you got from that. And then
yes,
at least you can be on the same page. At least you're talking about the same topic. Because, even on social media has brought out a lot of our miscommunication, uh,
I agree.
because people sometimes are saying the exact same thing, but they're so set on being right or getting the last word. They have a whole argument on social media, and they actually saying the same thing, because nobody's actually listening to the other.
Yeah,
To
yeah.
see,
How many times have we seen that?
oh my God, so many times. And then people have arguments about one thing, but each of them are actually talking about something different. It's like, well,
Yeah.
that's not even what I'm talking about. Okay, well, that's what I'm talking about. Okay, well, we just had a whole discussion and we ain't even talking about the same thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So you got to first make sure you're actually on the same page.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. And the thing we have to consider that by the time you get to the point where you're in a relationship with someone, they've been practicing these behaviors for
Right.
years. So to think that they're just going to stop cold turkey doing certain things is not rational.
Very true. Especially when you are over 40 and in the
Hmm.
dating scene, women, I guess women have more of a record of thinking they're going to change the man. He's going to change because she's so good to him or whatever. But, we really have to look at the fact that this person has been who they are for a really long time now.
Hmm.
And it's
Hmm.
highly unlikely, just as she probably is not going to change. It's not too bright to be thinking that somebody else is just going to change because you can cook some steak. I don't know.
No, you're right. You're right. Um, it's one of the key components that I eventually get to when I meet with people for couples therapy. I assess if they are still wanting to change their partner. And most of the time, you'll find that people are still holding out hope that somebody's going to change. And they're not. They're not. And what we have to do is be able to accept certain parts about our partner and be able to navigate that relationship with the understanding that it's not going to change. It's just not.
Like they always said, you have to choose someone whose flaws you can tolerate.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then we have to get to a point in our own personal growth where we can actually say, instead of like, because as a younger version of myself, I would always identify things I didn't like about people I dated. All right. And if I identified things I didn't like, that would be a reason why I would end the relationship rather than growing to a point where I realize that just as they have things that I don't like about them, I got stuff that they probably don't like about me
Right.
either. And, we have to weigh out what's most important. Are you really going to break up with somebody just because they don't clean the same way you do? Are you really going to break up with somebody because when you cook, you cook and you clean at the same time, and they cook and then they clean after? You know, those are the kind of things that you'd be surprised. People bring those issues into the office, and it's like you've got to accept some things about people, all right, in comparison to what you ultimately want. All right. think about the things that are most gratifying about the relationship. And if you are getting the things that are most in need, and then he decides that when he comes in, he's gonna like kick his shoes off and just leave him there, and that's gonna be the reason why you break up with him. I think there's some personal growth that needs to take place if you're considering ending a relationship over things like that.
That's true. That's true.
Mhm.
I had that situation because, I love to cook and I'm one of those people that cleans while they cook. So
Mhm.
by the time I sit down to eat, there's just the plate and it might be a skillet, maybe it just depends on what I cook. But in
Mhm.
general, it's just the plates. And so I was dating a guy and, the old school, they were like, you don't leave no dishes in the sink at night. Well, after I done had a full day and I done came in and cooked and we've eaten and stuff. And so now you got the issue with the two plates and maybe the skillet being in the sink. So if you got the issue with it, then you need to get up and wash those because I already washed everything else and cooked. So that was the issue for him though, because
Mhm.
he grew up in a household where, the women, you don't leave no dishes in the sink. And I'm just
Mhm.
like, listen, whatever. Um, you rinse your plates off. It ain't no food on them. They gonna be there in the morning. And when I get
Right.
up in the morning, then I will wash those dishes and keep it moving. But yeah, after I done ate at night, that's it. That
Yeah.
is it. I am unwinding for the evening. And if you got an issue with that, then you're gonna have to handle whatever it is you got the issue with. We did break up. I don't know if that played a role in it. It probably did. Because he told his mama on me.
What?
Told his mama on me. And this was a man that was over 60 years old.
Oh wow. Wow. Told his mom on you. Mm.
He told his mama.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. Well, that speaks to a lot of other issues, I'm sure, other than just the fact that you didn't like clean the plate at night.
And you know what I told him? I
What's that?
told her the same thing I told him. Either he better wash that dish himself, or maybe he can call you. Because they the ones had the problem with it. I was good.
Mhm. Absolutely.
I can stop cooking too. That's an option too.
See? All right. Well, got a couple more points here I want to bring up.
Okay.
All right. As you continue to entertain us with your experiences. Um, Another one I want to bring up here, and it intertwines with other things that we've said here, but I think it's still worth stating here that when you're in a relationship, you must agree to prioritize your individual well-being as well as the well-being of your relationship. And I think this is important to reiterate, especially for women, because women over the years have been told that they prioritize everything over themselves.
Yep, we just talked about that on my podcast Sunday. We were talking about why women are choosing to stay single, and this was
Mhm.
one of the topics that came up.
Yep. Been told for so many years, so many decades, so many generations, so many mothers, so many grandmothers, so many great grandmothers have told you that you got to take care of your husband, you got to take care of your kids, you got to make sure your house is clean, you got to make sure that meals are taken care of, you got to take care of things at church, and then you take care of yourself.
Mhm. The woman
And
last.
right, right. And I'm here to tell you that that's only going to damage yourself as an individual and
Mhm.
ultimately damage your relationship.
Mhm.
Uh, you must prioritize yourself within the context of a relationship. And someone that's really in a relationship with you that recognizes that you prioritize yourself will be even more in love with you because they see that you are important to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, one of the things, and this is really sad for me to reflect on, but I see it though very often in my private practice. There are primarily African American women that come in who for years have neglected themselves, raised their children alone pretty much, while their husband went to work, came home, and sat in a chair and drank a beer. Uh, and this was on for years. And now, when they look at themselves in the mirror, they are not at all pleased with the person that they see.
They don't even know her.
They don't.
They don't even
Good
know
point.
her. I went through, so I've talked about my stuff a little bit, and I
Mhm.
always make it personal because I can, tell the real truth. So I was in relationships since I was 15. My first relationship started at 15. He and I broke up. Well, I broke up with him at about 19, but it overlapped because I met this other guy, and this other guy, I liked him, and he was trying to win me over, but my ex didn't want to let me go. So there was about 3 to 4 months when it overlapped. So I went from one relationship right into the next relationship. There was no break in between there. And then from that relationship, he and I moved to Atlanta together. I broke up with him. And then 7 months later, I met my husband, and I
Mm,
was with him for 7 years. He was killed
mm,
when I was 33. So from the time I was 15 to the time I was 33, I was continually in a relationship, except for
mm,
7 whole months.
mm.
At that point, who was I? I don't
Yes,
even, I had no identity aside from being a girlfriend or a wife.
yes.
My whole from 15 on was always catering to the man in my life because
Hmm.
that's how I was raised, old school and traditional. So the only
Hmm.
thing I had a job and all that kind of stuff, but
Hmm.
I was always catering to him. That the man, my man came first,
Hmm.
like you just said. And so when my husband died, I was in mourning, first of all. And then once I got kind of my emotional self together, when I looked around, I was no longer in a relationship. My marriage was gone. So what do you think I did? I immediately started dating people who said they wanted to be married because
Hmm.
that marriage was snatched from me and I didn't know how to be anything else.
Yes.
It
Hmm.
was not until I went through a whole, I went through, so the next relationship was 3 years. The one after that was 6 years. Then I met the guy and I had my first heartbreak. And then I was in a relationship for 3.5 years after that. The heartbreak thing was like a 6 month experience. And that was totally, I didn't even know how to handle that. Because first of all, now I'm in my 40s and I got my first heartbreak and I don't
Hmm.
understand it.
Hmm.
If I
Hmm.
don't know anything else, I know how to be in a relationship. And, if I don't know nothing else, I got into a 3.5 year relationship. And it wasn't until after I broke up with him. And I know there's a pattern here. I know I break up with everybody. I'm not sure which. Anyway,
We can talk about that some other time.
yeah, right. I decided to take a year hiatus from dating because I felt drained at that point. That last relationship, he had some back issues and was out of work for a while. And it was just a whole lot going on. And I felt just so emotionally drained. I did not want to cater to anybody else. I didn't want to have to worry about what anybody else wanted, what made them comfortable, how they
Hmm.
felt about anything I chose to do. I just didn't want none of that. So I stopped dating. I would not meet any new men. The only men I interacted with was my guy friends that have been friends with me for like 20 years. We like literally are really friends. Now I would go places with them, we all drink it because I'm a friend, so I'm like one of the
Hmm.
guys, not exactly one of the guys, but you know what I mean. I'm a
Yeah.
friend. Those were
Hmm.
the only men that I would interact with at that time because if you asked me at that point what I like to do, Marvin, I didn't even know what I like to do anymore because
Hmm.
the guy I was just with, he was a truck driver. He didn't like to do anything but be with his kids. And I knew
Hmm.
I didn't like being with kids. I knew what I didn't like to do. But
Hmm.
what I actually did like to do, I didn't even know who I was. I didn't, I had started working on my shows and stuff. And so and this is another thing, on the outside, everybody thought, because they thought me and him were the perfect couple and everything was good. Everything was great, all of that kind
Mhm.
of stuff. But behind the scenes, it was other stuff because there was nothing that was for me aside from my business.
Mhm.
There was nothing that was really for me. Everything was for him. And during that year, man, I did a whole lot of what you call introspection.
Yes. Yes.
I did a whole lot of that because one of the things that was just so paramount to me is I felt like I needed to know what I like to do. Do I like to roller skate, ice skate?
Mhm.
Do I like to
Mhm.
bungee jump? What
Mhm.
do I like to just sit in the tub? What do I actually like to do? Who am I
Mhm.
without a
Mhm.
man?
Mhm.
And I
Mhm.
think a lot of times women, I was reading this thing, this lady, she had been married for 22 years and they were getting divorced. And, she was at the same place. She was like, I don't even know, when am I going, who am I? You
Mhm.
just don't even know anymore because you've dedicated your whole life to catering to somebody else. And when you look in the mirror, it's just like, okay, who are you without a man?
Mhm.
I think a
Yeah.
lot of our dating society today, because women, oh, you're going to be single for life. Well, okay, that could be better for me than to be
Right.
with some crazy person that's got issues and won't acknowledge them or get any help.
Mhm.
Being
Mhm.
single is not like the worst thing in the world. But,
Mhm.
as we talk about being a whole person, at least being on the path to discovering who you are
Yes.
and
Yes.
valuing yourself as a person without anybody else.
Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Whew.
And this is where I believe, uh, again, as an extension of what you just said and what we talked about earlier, that this journey of discovering, or this journey of discovery, is endless.
Right.
It's really endless when you take a look at it. You know, I also, again, I always reference, the time I spent with couples in therapy, and I always uh, sort of assess early on the stagnancy that people experience in their marriages, where they are not growing as individuals and the relationship is not growing either. They've really given up on their curiosity about life and curiosity about themselves and the person that they're with.
Mm.
Just given up on it, right? And they wonder why they're in a situation where their marriage is lifeless, or they wonder why their partner decided to step out on the relationship.
Mm.
You know, um, I the this topic as it relates to women, this topic today, uh, where we're discussing being with someone that has issues, as it relates to women, it is so important that women are able to separate this traditional style or way that they have been raised from being able to be in a relationship with someone that may have some mental health concerns. Because your traditional way of living, or the traditional way that you've been raised, will tell you to stay there no matter what,
Yep. Oh, and that's the worst thing ever.
right? And that is not the case. And that absolutely brings us to our seventh point. And the seventh point is standard relationship rules apply. So when you are in a relationship with someone and you've identified that there's something else going on with that individual, the relationship rules still apply. All right. If this person has decided that for whatever reason, um, they're going to be physical with you and be, and threaten your existence, and it's because they got some mental health issues, standard rules still apply. And one of the rules is that you're not going to be harmed within the context of your relationship.
Okay.
All right. So we have to consider those things when we deciding if we're going to stay with someone that has some mental health issues, because sometimes it does get severe. but the standard rules still apply. Um, there are some diagnoses, um, for example, in some severe cases of bipolar disorder, lead to the individual having a very, very strong sexual appetite, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which will lead to them on many cases actually stepping outside of the relationship because they are in a manic phase, right? So in these cases, you got to consider if this individual, number one, has identified that there is a concern that they're working on, or if this is an individual that is in complete denial and their mania is causing them to step outside the marriage and get involved with other people, because we all know what the potential is for that.
Mm-hmm.
You step outside the marriage, there's always potential for disease and pregnancy.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So, and and again, relationship standards apply here. I don't think that people agree to be in relationships or agree to be married with the understanding that, hey, you can go ahead and have a kid with somebody else.
Right.
That just don't apply here. So as much as I am promoting that we really educate ourselves when it comes to our own mental health and the mental health of the individual that we're with, I'm also promoting that you maintain some standards.
Right.
Because if you allow it, people who have unsuccessfully or unaware of their mental health issues, this could drag on for years. And you will find yourself waking up one day, 20 years later, and it's no different from when you first met that person. So it is essential that you put a timeline on this stuff. And maybe some that are listening may not quite understand what I mean by that, so I'm going to explain it to them.
Okay. Please do.
So you meet somebody, all right, and you're really enjoying that company. And along the way, you've discovered that there are some concerns. They deny what you're saying and say that ain't nothing wrong with them. You attempt to be patient with them because maybe they might be in denial initially, but later on, you're thinking in your head, okay, if I stick with them and I can continue to encourage them, we might be able to get somewhere. You need to put a time limit on that because that's just based in hope, right? Relationships are not based in hope entirely. They are based in reality and they are based in steps. Love is an action word,
Mm-hmm.
all right? And if somebody coming to you and said that they love you, they need to be doing things
That's
that
right.
mean, I love you.
That's right. I've been saying that for years. That's a verb.
This. And if someone is hurting you in a relationship, because that's the key there too, you got to be able to verbalize that the behavior is hurting you. And if you verbalize that it's hurting you and they still don't do anything about it, you're just setting yourself up for years of abuse. So you got to give yourself a time limit when it comes to this stuff.
Okay.
And yeah, and it really, really may be difficult for some to hear because maybe they've been in it for years now. All right. And in my mind, having done this work for a while, that's not going to serve you well. And if you look in the mirror and if you take a look at a picture from 10 years ago, you're going to see the difference.
Ooh, that stress will get you.
Right.
Look in the mirror and probably look at your vital readings. Your blood pressure probably up. Might be
Yep.
having headaches and migraines. Yeah,
Mhm.
that stress
Absolutely.
will get you. And women do deal with a lot of that stuff, and they don't know why they're overeating, because
Yes.
emotional. So I know for me, when I go into an emotional, I won't eat.
Hmm.
So if I'm depressed, like I don't suffer from depression or anything like that, but we all get sad and depressed. So when
Absolutely.
I went through that heartbreak,
Hmm.
I got down to a size 6, which when I look at those pictures, I'm like, man, that's just way too small for me. You know,
Mhm.
it didn't look good. But you
Mhm.
know, when you smaller, people just accept it like, oh, you because thin is always okay. But the
Right,
other,
it's acceptable.
yeah, the other way is not. Some people don't eat and some people overeat. You know, and
Mhm.
you see a
Mhm.
woman and she's going through all of that stuff. So not only could she be overeating, but then she's stressed and her blood pressure is up. You know,
Yeah.
and so
Mhm.
then you start to get a combination of things, and it's all because she's holding on to this relationship because she was taught that, you know, till death do you part, and death is coming quickly for you.
Yes.
I mean, it's not funny
Yes.
with all of this
Yes.
stuff going on. That death is going, and then he gonna still be out here doing the same thing while you done killed
Exactly.
yourself. Get the
Exactly.
heck out of that crap, man.
You're absolutely right about that.
I
Um,
really hate that we were taught this whole, because my mom, for example, you know, before my mom's dementia got really bad, you know, she started because they forget what secrets are. They know the
yeah.
information, they just can't remember that they ain't supposed to tell nobody. And
Mhm.
so she started telling me a lot of stuff. And you know, a lot of these women were just not happy in these marriages, but they stayed because that's what they was taught. The lady
Mhm.
that owned the store across the street from my house, I remember one day Flo was just because she's sickly now. She gave up the store now, but she was probably in her 60s at the time. And she
Mhm.
told me, she said, Gal, she said, if I knew then what I know now, I would have been the biggest hoe and wouldn't have cared. And I would have never got married. I'm like, wow, Flo. Because, you know, they have been married for, if she was 50, they probably been married. For, I think they got married when she was like 18 or 19. She
Mhm.
had been married pretty much all her life.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
And she was like, if I knew then what I know now. And you know, once you get, especially in your 50s, you do have some if I knew then what I know now moments, you
Yes,
know,
you do.
because
Mhm.
it's like even with relationships, I was in relationships forever. If I knew then what I know now, ain't no way I would have did that. That actually was a hindrance. I would not have done that at
Mhm.
all.
Mhm.
At
Mhm.
15, I didn't even know who I was. I got trapped in that stuff and had never even really developed a me yet.
Yes. Didn't even have your identity yet.
Right. Right.
Mhm.
That was definitely, I would not suggest that for any young girls. You need to go ahead, focus on developing a life that you want to live. You know,
Yes.
focus on what makes you happy. So if you happy by yourself, then you can
Mhm.
look to somebody to add to you, not to make
Exactly.
you happy. When I hear somebody say, I want somebody that's gonna make me happy. No, you
Mhm.
can already be happy. And then they can add some stuff that you didn't even know about. They can add to you, but they
Yes.
make you happy. Because what's their definition of happy?
Right. Mhm.
Yeah, that whole, I wish that had never happened to us.
I know. I know. And we are slowly sort of like unraveling this. And there are some that really support this, and there are some that are still just kind of holding on to the traditional ways of like hampering women and burdening them with our existence. And I am one that am I'm not on board with that. I'm just simply not. I have seen too many women come into my office who um, are just unraveling and just decompensating before my eyes. And we've we've gotten this understanding from a society standpoint to believe that the key to you all's existence is to go to the gym and to start dieting, when that's not the case. It's not the case. You got to take a look at what you are putting in your body from an emotional and stress standpoint.
Yep.
You got to take a look at that. And if you start there, and then because you've released yourself from all those sort of toxins, then you decide that you want to like eat differently and exercise, do it. But it's got to first start with all the things you're carrying around with you.
And
And
it's funny that you say that because both of, you know, I have two shows with, one's a holistic health practitioner and one's a naturopath. And of
Mhm,
course, he's holistic as well. And
mhm,
both of them have said that when they start to talk about health, the first thing that both of them on both of their first shows, the first things that they talked about was stress.
Yes.
Even though they had different topics, they were both talking about the role that stress plays in your health. You got to get rid of that stress because the stress produces that cortisol. So even when
Hmm.
we had the weight loss show, the first thing he talked about was stress because your body's going to produce the cortisol and you're going to hold on to belly fat. It don't matter what
Yes.
else you're doing.
Yep. Hmm. Hmm.
You go.
Absolutely right.
You ever seen a skinny person with a pot belly?
Yep.
Yep, stressed. They are
That's true.
stressed. That's
Hmm.
that's the really kind of one of the weirdest things to see because you like, how are you so skinny? But where you get a belly from? Like your body couldn't put the fat all over the place or whatever, but
Yes.
that's stress, that's cortisol. It does the belly fat thing. So you can
Hmm.
always you could tell a person's issues. But I want to throw something else in here real quick because I know we only got what it's about 19 minutes left.
Sure.
It's funny that we're having this discussion here about
Hmm.
women and the traditional things because this morning, and I shared it on my page today, and it's a guy, and he's really going in on this woman, and the topic is, what do you bring to the table besides sex, right?
Mm.
And so you have women nowadays, he was talking about how he got his own house and he got his own car and he got this. And, the woman, she clearly has a traditional mindset because she's talking about, I make your house a home. I clean that house. I cook for you. I do this. And he's like, I can pay a maid to do those things. What do you bring to the table? Well,
Hmm.
I'm looking at it from my perspective, okay, I got my own house just like you. I got
Hmm.
my own car just like you. I can pay somebody to cook and clean too, just like you. So tell
Hmm.
me, mister, what do you bring to the table besides penis?
Yes.
Let's see. You know what? I think I'm gonna do a video and say that. But you know what? What men say?
What's that?
Because I actually did ask that one time. They come back with protection. We protect y'all and we kill the bugs and the stuff that you Negro, I got a gun. I can protect us both.
Oh man. I see. As women have been taught to kind of like function in these traditional roles where you're taking care of everything. The flip side to this, when it comes to men, is that we only told to do two things: and that's provide and protect.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's it. Which
Mm-hmm.
is part of the reason why we have so many issues communicating with our partners. All right, because that has not been a priority for us. We've never been told that it's important to be emotionally available for your
Right.
partner.
That's it
Never
right
been,
there. That's it
never
right
been told that. We've been
there.
told go out and get a job and take care of this house.
Yep. Yep. And now that women have their own houses, women have rental properties and stuff. So if you got your own house, you've dealt with in the wintertime, because right before it get cold, the mice try and get in. So
Hmm.
women have dealt with all of that kind of stuff. And though some women may be terribly afraid of them, but we all know how to call pest control. you
Yeah.
know, we've
Hmm.
all seen a spider because we all get spiders right around fall time. The spiders
Yep.
come in, you see the web.
Yep.
And so here's my little secret on the bugs, the smaller bugs. Get you some hairspray, especially
Hmm.
some got to be glued free spray. And you even the wasp. I hit that wasp with some got to be glued hairspray, the freeze spray. I hit him in midair, he dropped. And then all I had to do was beat him to death. Yeah, I didn't even have to hurt him. You got a spider, get them
Hmm.
with that got to be glued hairspray, freeze spray. It will
Yeah.
stop them right there. And then they'll curl up and die and suffocate because they can't handle it or whatever.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
yeah, uh, I I'm gonna do that video again. And if somebody come up with protection, I'm gonna reach through the screen and hit them.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not. It's not. You know. While and I think you can appreciate this, Xavier. I think you are evolved, and are a lot of women right now. I'm sure you can appreciate a man that wants to protect you. But if that's what he says is the number one thing he's bringing to the table, that ain't the man you want.
No, it's not. It's not. Matter of fact, that's gonna be my next podcast. I'm gonna do exactly like them guys just did. because they attacked that poor girl. But I'm not going
Mhm.
to attack nobody. But yeah, that's what we need to do. Mhm.
Absolutely.
Thank
Yeah.
you for this show. You brought my next podcast to the table.
No problem. No problem. So let's review these points as we always do.
Yes.
All right. So uh how to be with someone who has issues. Number one thing, you got to create safe, open lines of communication. You have to create a space for them, a place where you can actually talk about your mental and emotional needs, right? And sometimes it's good to kind of open up the conversation by talking about your own and giving them opportunity to feel comfortable talking about theirs, letting them know that, honey, you can be vulnerable with me. I'm not telling anybody. This is between me and you. Me and you are in this relationship. Just creating a very safe space for people to communicate is really, really important when it comes to this. Also, you got to check yourself. You got to figure out, are you projecting your own stuff on somebody else? You know, we are complicated individuals. And sometimes our own journey in life brings us to a place where we are projecting our own experiences on other people. You got to be able to do some introspection, as you stated earlier, be able to identify if this is my stuff or is something really going on with that person. Number three, your mental and emotional concerns don't mean you're crazy or unstable. So we got to be able to have dialogues with people where we're not at the extreme end of the spectrum. You know, just because you're sad sometimes, just because you're distant sometimes, just because, you're angry sometimes doesn't mean that you're crazy or unstable. It means that there are things that are underlying those surface emotions that need to be untangled. All right. And by sitting down and talking with your trusted partner, you might be able to get through some of those things. Or together, you might be led to actually go speak with someone to help the both of you untangle that stuff. So that's number three. Number four, know that it is not your job to fix your partner. It just isn't. So, as much as I am encouraging people to be present and to be available and to create a space for your partner to be able to talk about whatever concerns they have, you gotta also understand that there's a limit to it and that you are not their therapist. You're not. And don't put yourself in that position because most people will, and I've heard this in therapy also, you know, one of the initial questions I ask people, have you been to therapy before? And they'll say, no, I don't need a therapist. I got my wife. Or, or I got my husband. Like, that's a problem. All right. Number five, you got to accept the version that people bring of themselves. And sometimes that version that people bring is not what you're accustomed to. It wasn't how you were raised. Your father's not like that. Your mother is not like that. It is something that is entirely different from what you are accustomed to. But it is who they are, and it's who they've been all their life. So, barring it being abusive, sometimes we got to accept that version of who that person is and how they present it into the relationship. Number six,
Hmm.
we must agree to prioritize our individual well-being as well as the well-being of the relationship. It's really important to prioritize yourself. And this, probably going to lose some listeners on this. Your relationship is not more important than you. It just simply isn't. Because when you prioritize your relationship over you, you lose yourself, you lose your identity,
Yep.
which happens in relationships sometimes. And if you're in a healthy relationship, when that occurs, your partner will begin to have a dialogue with you about, you seem to be losing yourself. What do you need to do to get back to who you are? I haven't seen you going out with your friends lately. I haven't seen you in the back, with the plants lately. What do you need? Because it's going to happen in relationship. You're going to lose yourself periodically. All right.
Yep.
But you got to prioritize yourself so you can stay away from that slippery slope. Because once you head down it and you get to the bottom of it, it's really hard to get back up that hill. So it is important that you prioritize yourself in relationships. And that means also that you do the work of identifying what your issues are so that your partner does not have to manage what's going on with you entirely. So that's number 6. And number 7, standard relationship rules apply. When it comes to being in a relationship with someone that you think has issues, the standard relationship rules apply. What you don't tolerate with someone that doesn't have issues, you shouldn't tolerate with someone that does have issues.
Right. Absolutely.
It's,
Absolutely.
it's not an excuse for them to treat you poorly. It's not an excuse for them to abuse you verbally, mentally, emotionally, physically. It's not an excuse. So at the end of the day, we got to love ourselves. And we have to love ourselves more than anything else.
Absolutely.
And if you practice that in your life, people will love you. You'll be able to extend love to others. And, as the old saying says, it's love that make the world go around.
It's love to make the world go round. And a lot of people just not capable of love in these days and time because they need some therapy. So this was a great show. I enjoyed it. I always get to talking about my stuff because
Well, no, I'm here for you too.
those are the things that I know to be true from my
Mhm.
perspective. I can't speak for all women because everybody doesn't have the same, experience.
Mhm.
And some women should be grateful that they don't, have, because that 15 to 33, that was a bad move, but it was what I was raised to think was the move.
Yeah,
But yeah,
yeah.
so everybody has different experiences and stuff, but I can speak to the ones who may have the same experience as me, and may still be tolerating some stuff in a relationship because you don't know anything different. You know,
Yes,
you just don't know.
yes.
Like I said,
And
I didn't know what I like to do because I was in a relationship where he didn't like to do anything but spend time with his kids because he was freshly divorced and
mhm,
he was parenting out of guilt. And so we had the kids every weekend. So
mhm,
I didn't know what I liked to do, but I know what I didn't like to do. And
mhm.
if that's what your existence is about, it's time for you to find yourself. It's time for you to find yourself. So this was a great show. When is your next show?
Yeah, my next show is going to be February the 24th,
Okay.
and I will do 12 to 1:30 again.
Yep.
Uh, I will be here, and I will let you know very soon what the topic is going to be. I have something in mind based on today's discussion, but I have something else in mind too. But we'll make a decision, and everybody will be able to see on your page what we're going to talk about next
Okay, that is so great. So do you have any final words?
time. Yeah, my thoughts are again toward relationships and what really makes them work. And what makes relationships really work and thrive is communication. Creating spaces for people to communicate, no matter what the concern is, no matter what you're dealing with, you got to create a space where one can communicate with you and feel safe about communicating. And we have to provide these spaces absent of threats where we say, like, I don't know if I can continue to do this, or I don't know, if I can remain in this relationship if this don't get fixed. Those kind of like commentaries don't work well in relationships. We have to figure out how to communicate with one another
I'm
and to
guilty
be
of
able.
that. I'm guilty of saying that.
Yeah, of course. I think we all have been. We
Mm.
got to be able to communicate effectively with one another in a loving manner. I like to say when I'm having a difficult conversation, is that before I even get into it, I just like to remind them, I love you and I ain't going nowhere. But we need to talk about something, okay? And then throughout the conversation, there will be more reminders sprinkled in it that I ain't going nowhere. I love you, but this is a problem. All right. And then most of the time, Xavier, and this is something that you probably have experienced. A lot of times we go to people and we have concerns about them. And during the course of that difficult discussion, you find out that it isn't just about them, but it's about you too. There's something about you that's contributing to that issue. So there's always like this need for balance when it comes to communication. Instead of entering into a discussion where we're pointing fingers at the other person, the conversation should go in the vein of there's something going on with us. There's something about our communication, you know, and maybe you're not even able to identify how you're negatively contributing at that point. But I guarantee you, if you stay in that discussion, you will be able to see how you can improve your communication as well as your partners. So I cannot say enough about communication. There is nothing more important than good, solid communication. We can go on and on about infidelity. We can go on and on about finances. We can go on and on about people's background and their parents being too involved in your relationship. We can go on and on about that stuff. All of those fall into the same category. You got to talk about it.
And
So,
that good solid communication, just so
mhm,
that people know, communicating is not just about talking.
mhm,
Communicating is about listening to understand.
yes.
That's the most important part of communicating, is
Mhm,
listening to
mhm,
understand.
yes.
Because if we don't have one person, you alternate back and forth. So if one person is not listening to understand, then
Mhm,
there is not good communication going on.
there is not. So it is essential. You are correct that we become really good listeners. And the example that you gave earlier, and if I'm correct, I think one of our earlier shows, I've shared this with you. It's always good to sit quietly and listen to what someone has to say and repeat back what they just said.
Uh-huh.
And if they say, no, that's not quite what I said, you sit back again and say, well, please tell me what I need to hear. Or
Yep.
please tell me what I didn't hear.
Right. What is it that
Right?
you want me to understand in this
Yes,
conversation?
exactly. Exactly. And once you get to that part, once you can digest what they're saying, all right, then they can digest what you're saying a whole lot better.
And that does not require a lot of cussing and name calling.
They just don't. They just don't.
Okay.
All that cursing and name calling and pointing fingers, that's just egos and people just want to be right. And relationships are not about being right. It's not
Right.
about ego. When we decide that we're going to let our egos go and stop trying to be right all the time, your relationship will be a whole lot better.
I was watching a movie the other day, and the one woman was telling the other woman something about relationships, and the woman, said why she didn't feel that was, good advice, and the lady was like, "Do you want to be right or do you want to be happy?"
Right. See? Yep. And I must say that when it comes to our gender, when it comes to men, we got to be right about stuff. We got to be able to be in charge and tell people that this is the way it should be done. When in reality, mm-mm, it's not about being right. It's about being happy.
All right. Well, thank you, Marvin, for